Hello everyone, my name is Mariam Demloj and I'm currently a 6th year medical student. I will be guiding you through 4 important topics in neurology, and my goal is to help you truly understand the topics so you can remember and apply them in your entrance exam. So please, if you have any question, feel free to contact me through my email account. So today we'll start with the first topic, which is anatomy and function of neurons. We'll break down what they look like, how they work, and why they matter. By the end of this session, you will be able to understand two main things. First, the different parts of a neuron and their specialized roles, and second, the functional classification of neurons. So, what exactly is a neuron? Neurons are the fundamental functional unit of the nervous system. They are specialized cells that transmit electrical and chemical signals through the nervous system. So I will give you an example. You can think of the neuron as the body's messenger. So if a person is putting his hand on a dangerous hot stove, neurons can send signals to the brain to feel this high temperature. And in return, another type of neuron will send an order to this person's hand to move it away from the hot stove. Here we can see a picture of a neuron, which is composed of several parts. First, we have the cell body, which contains the nucleus. We have the dendrites, we have the axon, and we have the axon terminals. So the signal flow of the information, first from the dendrites, the information will flow from the dendrites to the cell body, to the axon, and then to the axon terminals. The axon terminals will secrete what is called neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers which will help to transmit the signal from this neuron to another neuron. And here around the axon we can see those yellow things. It is called myelin sheath. In yellow are the myelin sheath, and between the myelin we have some gaps. Those gaps are called node of Ranvier. Inside the myelin we have this dark thing. This is called Schwann cells, and those Schwann cells secrete the myelin sheath. So what do we benefit from those myelin? It will help to transmit the information in a faster and in a more efficient way. So instead of the signal to be transmitted all the way through the axon, the signal will be transmitted like this. It will jump above the myelin sheath inside the node of Ranvier like this. So it will be transmitted faster and more efficiently. So here we have more detailed definitions of each part of a neuron. So as we said, the information will flow from the dendrites to the cell body, to the axon, and then to the axon terminal. The axon terminal will secrete neurotransmitters which will transmit the signal to another neuron. So let's imagine now this axon terminal secreted a neurotransmitter, and the neurotransmitter will now flow to the dendrite. Let's imagine that this is the dendrite of another neuron. Okay, so neurotransmitters now have reached the dendrites of another neuron. Those dendrites, they are the receiving end of a neuron, and they have receptors to bind to the neurotransmitters, and they will start initiating electrical signals. Those electrical signals will pass through the cell body, which contains the nucleus and other organelles. The cell body is the main part of the nucleus, and it is the site where graded potentials occurs and proteins are synthesized. So inside the cell body we will have graded potentials. Graded potentials are some changes in the membrane potentials that will later sum up. They will sum up inside the axon to generate an action potential. So messages will be, the signal will be transmitted dendrite and then cell body and then to the axon. The axon here is a long slender projection that conducts action potential. As we said, the graded potentials were present inside the cell body. They added up to form an action potential that is transmitted throughout the axon. And note that not all the axons are surrounded by myelin sheath. We have some myelinated and some unmyelinated axons. And then lastly, the signal will reach the axon terminal, and then the axon terminal, as we said, will release a neurotransmitter. We said that this neurotransmitter will be released to send the signal to another neuron. But now let's talk more in details. This neurotransmitter from the axon terminal will be released into something that is called the synaptic cleft. It is written here. What is a synaptic cleft? The synaptic cleft is the small gap or space between two neurons where nerve signals are transmitted. Specifically, it's the extracellular space between the presynaptic membrane of one neuron and the postsynaptic membrane of another neuron. Neurotransmitters released from the presynaptic neuron travel across this synaptic cleft to bind with receptors on the postsynaptic neurons, allowing communication between the cells. So we said that the axon terminals will release neurotransmitters. So let's say that this is the neuron. It releases the neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters will pass through this synaptic cleft and they will bind to receptors on the other neuron, which is called the postsynaptic neuron. So here we will have the dendrites of the second neurons where it will have the receptors for the neurotransmitters. Those are some key definitions that I have already explained, so you can read them on your own later on when you study the lecture. We have completed our first objective, which is understanding the anatomy and function of neurons. And now we are moving to our second objective, which is the functional classification of neurons. Not all neurons do the same job. That's why they are broadly classified into three types based on their primary function in the nervous system. We have the sensory neurons, which bring information into the nervous system. We have the motor neurons, which send commands out to the muscles or to the glands, and we have the interneurons, which do the processing in between. And now we will explain each one. We have the sensory neurons. They act like reporters. They gather information from our senses like touch, sight, or sound, and they deliver it to the brain and spinal cord so we can react to the world around us. So let's take this picture as an example. Here we have a cactus, and of course it's painful. It touched this person's finger and it caused pain. So this pain is transmitted throughout the sensory neuron, and then it will go to the spinal cord. From the spinal cord, it will go through two pathways. The first pathway is to go up and relay in the brain so that the person can be aware of the pain sensation. And the second pathway is to go through the interneuron, or also known as the relay neuron. From the relay neuron, it will pass through the motor neuron that will act on the muscle of the hand in order to move the hand from the cactus, which is the source of the brain. So the pain will be transmitted through the sensory neuron that will go to the spinal cord and will go to the brain to send a sensation of pain to the person, and also at the same time it will go to the relay or interneuron, and then from the interneuron to the motor neuron to the effector organ, which is the muscle, to cause a reflex, that is the reflex of moving the arm away from the danger, which is the cactus. And now we have the second type of neurons, which are the motor neurons. They are like the action team. These neurons transmit motor commands from the central nervous system. The central nervous system is composed from both the spinal cord and the brain. So they transmit motor commands from the CNS to the effector organs, such as the muscles to move our hands or legs, for example, and to the glands so that they can secrete, for example, saliva or tears, etc. Those motor neurons either receive a command from the spinal cord, such as this case, where the person felt pain from the cactus. The pain traveled through the sensory neuron, relayed into the spinal cord, and then to the interneuron, and directly as a reflex, the spinal cord commanded the motor neuron to act on the effector organ so that the person can move his hand quickly and to avoid the pain. This is called a reflex when the command is sent to the motor neuron throughout the spinal cord. Whereas in normal cases, for example, when I want to do an exercise, a certain exercise, for example, I want to train my hand muscles, so my brain decides that now I want to train my shoulder muscles, for example. So I start to exercise. This is not a reflex. This is a normal response of my motor neurons that have received a command from my brain to move, for example, my shoulder muscles. Whereas when we have a reflex, which is when I need a rapid response from the muscle to protect myself, which is coming from the spinal cord. Why is this called a reflex, and why does this reflex receive a command from the spinal cord and not from the brain? Because imagine this person is in pain. The pain will be transmitted through the sensory neuron, and then for the pain to reach the brain, for the person to feel that he is in pain, and then the brain should decide that there is pain and that I should react to this pain and remove my hand. This will take time, whereas I need a rapid response to protect myself. So this rapid response occurs through this interneuron that will connect directly the sensory neuron to the motor neuron, so I can do a rapid reflex. So once again, a reflex is when the motor neuron receives a command from the spinal cord, whereas a normal movement occurs when my brain decides that I want to move, so I move. Lastly, the third type is the interneurons. We already talked about them. Interneurons are a connection between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons. Sensory neurons are also called afferent neurons, and motor neurons are also called efferent neurons. Interneurons are the connection between both the two types of neurons. Their primary function is to process information and coordinate responses by integrating sensory inputs and motor outputs, thus facilitating complex reflexes and behaviors such as the reflex to the pain to move our hand quickly as a protective response. And with that, we've come to the end of our session. I really hope I was able to make this topic clearer and easier to understand for you. Before we finish, here's something to keep in mind as you prepare for your exam. You can expect questions about the specific functions of each part of the neuron, the direction in which the signal flows, and the roles of each type of neurons. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all the best in your studying. If you'd like, I prepared some questions for you if you want to practice, and I put the answer of each. Thank you.